Hi everyone, so here we are live talking about the sneak peek of the safety culture framework. So Sam Neal has me very much warned today not to give everybody every single of the diagnostic criteria, because I am known as the queen of overshare, but we definitely want to at least give you a bit of a sneak peek and talk to you about how we've got to where we have in the first draft. Well, I'm going to say the 47th draft of the safety culture framework, because I don't think we first as easily as that sounds. What you think?
147.
How are you today anyway? We've just been talking about the perils of trying to talk in public on a Monday. Are you doing all right?
I'm all right. Yes. Survived the weekend. We have no snow now. It actually looks like it never happened. So I'm allowed to. I'm able to leave the house, which has been nice. Yes.
Nice, very nice. Well, I'm in a lot of trouble with my children, but the snow has melted. It's as if I spent most of the evening myself standing out, like rubbing it between my hands to melt it. They were absolutely disgusted with it, but that's part of the adventure, really.
The joys of parenthood.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't take any of the credit, but you do get all of the blame. Certainly, that's what happens in our house anyway. The good stuff's a happy accident. So, in terms of our conversation today, Sam, we kind of talked about, I suppose, exploring the evolution of the safety culture framework. I think we talked in the last session about why we thought it was a good idea for us to kind of work together on this, and what you'd seen as an experienced safety professional around what you felt was and wasn't working when it came to implementation around safety culture. I guess before we get into the nuts and bolts of where we've got to with the kind of the version of the framework that we're taking into our co-working session next week with some senior industry professionals, I guess I'd love to hear from you, just to frame why we've chosen what we have, where you see the gaps, I guess, in current approaches to safety culture, or without even talking negatively about those things, what's just the stuff that you wish was there that you think would make a big difference for people to really make safety behaviours just part of the everyday, and how people show up in that more agreed way. So what do you notice you think would be helpful for there to be more of, or the stuff that you notice that undermines the great safety culture work that people are trying to do?
I think it's, and I guess this kind of takes us back to the conversation we had right at the start about what are the challenges that we're trying to help unlock, or what are the issues that we're trying to hold people's hands with, if you like, and put an arm around the shoulder. And there are a myriad different ways of going at culture, and there are, I think, very much for me at the moment, there are so many different models, so many different ways of doing things, so many different theories and books and research, and you do get a little bit, it's kind of almost starstruck a little bit in like, well, which is the right approach? Where am I going? What am I doing? How do I do this? And I'm not necessarily saying that any particular model or approach is wrong, or any particular model or approach is right. I just think sometimes I wish, particularly in my career, there wasn't necessarily one way of doing things, but there was a little bit more clarity in trying to build a positive or proactive culture, or culture of safety that was suitable for the business that I was working in, rather than trying to go for what good looks like straight away, or utopia and the best sort of culture of safety in the world. Is what's appropriate for me now, and what does that progressive continual improvement, that movement forward look like? And I've been there. We're going to get everyone trained. Cool. And then there's this sort of deathly silence. Well, everyone's done the training and no one's doing what we're asking them to do. Well, yeah, because you've sort of sheep dipped everybody in something that's quite generic, that isn't that isn't aligned to the operating context or the way that the business is, or where the business is at the moment in time. So it's, I guess sometimes for me, it's less around what I would have wanted, or what I would have done differently. It's kind of more around getting organizations sort of ready for that sort of journey that they're about to go on, but providing them, or providing me, as I was as a full-time safety professional, with a sort of meaningful culture journey that's proportionate and appropriate for the business as it was at that time, rather than just coming in, chucking a load of training and expecting us to be right at the very top, within 12 to 18 months. And then there's a shock and surprise that 6 months into the program, nothing's working because we've shot for the stars and we're nowhere near it.
Yeah. And I suppose there's two things that I hear in what you've described there, from a kind of the psychology of embedding new behaviour. And one is about that readiness for change. So recognizing that one size doesn't fit all. And I think that understanding your operating context and defining what good for you is massive. And it's something that we don't see enough in culture work, certainly in safety culture work. I think my observation is there's a tendency to embed a series of steps rather than being really clear about what the ideal outcomes are for you in your context, and then creating a change journey that gets you towards those outcomes, and then using that as a platform to get to the next stage of ideal through. So that's massive. The other thing I hear is that bit around putting the onus for change on the individual a huge amount, and not considering the context that they're operating within. So that see it a huge amount, don't we? I see it in broad culture change as well, where we use training and coaching as our interventions for change. And while those are helpful, it's not the only thing. The knowledge that people have, the skill that people have, isn't the only thing that influences how they behave on a day-by-day basis. And I think that's one of the really exciting things that I've been interested to explore in the work that we've been doing, is that in our culture work, kind of more broadly, when we're looking at kind of broader workplace culture and broader behaviour change, we really focus around considering things like psychological contracts. So what do people believe is expected or reasonable to expect of them, and to what extent do they think the business is holding up their end of the deal, so they should bother to do the stuff that's expected of them. So that's massively important, and I think that's got a huge influence on eroding positive intention, because you might ask me to do these 10 things, but if you promised me these 1 or 2 things and you're not doing those, then why should I bother doing the stuff that you ask me to do? So there's a piece about that trust and that cohesion of the contract, that actually you're doing what you say you're going to do, so then I feel responsible to do what I've said I need to do. And I think there's also a massive thing about social norms and narratives that we don't talk about, like that hidden stuff that happens after the training, that you go in, you think about a new role, you go in, you do the couple of days of induction training or whatever it may be, but then you get on the line and people truly tell you how it gets done around here, and well, don't bother with that, or to meet the production target, we do this or we do that. And if we're doing the training in isolation to influencing that stuff, or understanding that stuff so we can influence it, then we're never really giving ourselves the chance to influence behaviour. So I think that's one of the things that I'm really excited about, is that actually some of those broader levers that we might know are there, or we kind of are suspicious are there, but we're not nudged often by that more, well, let's get to perfect and train everybody towards this method. I don't think we get the opportunity to explore that. And I think that's what I'm really excited about in terms of the factors that we've built into the framework, is nudging people to explore that whole system, rather than just thinking about the narrow factors that feel like the easiest ones to explore. I don't know what your thoughts are on some of those elements as we develop them, if they felt new to you, or maybe not even new, maybe just not ones that you've been encouraged to zero in on before. What's your thoughts?
I think the operating context is probably one of the interesting ones, because it's not something from a cultural perspective we've ever been, from the work that I've done in the past through bringing people in, it's not one that's ever really stood out, because we're very much focused on trying to fix the person. So it's the individual's fault. It's the individuals receive the training, they should know what they're doing, but we've failed to understand what that environmental or operating context is, and how that's influenced their behaviour in that time. And I don't have to go back far in my career to look at an incident where we've probably blamed the individual, but on hindsight, really it was probably latent conditions or weaknesses in the system or the operating context that's actually caused them to act in a certain way. So that one for me is I'm quite passionate about, and I think it's really important that with we've been able to sort of include that in part of the framework that we've created. So I think it's huge. You know, the environment in which people operate in influences people's behaviour. So we need to call that out, but we also need to make sure that it's conducive to an environment where people can, what do they say, make it easy to do the right thing and hard to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, well, and I think there's a really big thing that psychology has accidentally done, I think, over the last few years with the introduction of things like personality profiles and things. I wish I wasn't old enough to kind of be part of the early lift of those, but I'm afraid to say I am. I know I don't look it, obviously, but,
no.
But I think, but yeah, well done. There was a delay there, but you got it in just in time. But
yeah, it must be the Wi-Fi. It's the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, straight away. But I think there's a really interesting thing that happened, that when we introduced things like personality profiling into the world of work, we encouraged this. There's a psychological phenomenon that's really interesting called fundamental attribution bias. And what happens within that is it's our natural tendency as human beings that whenever we act, we consider the context. So if for example, we were both late for an appointment that we had together, my natural instinct would be to attribute that to a personal characteristic that you have. So Sam is disorganized, or he's lazy, or something like that. But for myself, I'm much more likely to say, well, it was because of the traffic, or the bin lorry, or the ice, or whatever. So we've got this natural tendency as human beings assume that other people's behavior is due to their inherent characteristics, and our behavior is down to the context that we're operating within. And I think the introduction of things like personality profiles within the world of work, where we've all been given colors that predict how we're going to act in different situations, have reinforced that bias and that belief that actually a huge amount of people's behavior is influenced by their own personal preferences and priorities. But the research actually indicates, and when you look at things like the predictive power of personality tools, the most valid one out there only predicts at best, about 40% of workplace behaviour. So even whenever that tool is measuring things really well and people are on their most self-insightful, it only shows and predicts about 40% of what people will do within the moment. The other 60% is much more likely to be influenced by contextual narrative norms, by our beautiful prefrontal cortex, which just makes logical, rational decisions based on the stimuli and the rules of the environment that we're in. So I think a lot of the work that's done around culture and just around behaviour change within work, whether it's in safety or more generally, has been really quietly influenced by that bias and also by that narrative that personality profiling has brought in, that if we fix the person, we can fix the behaviour. But actually, the vast majority of behaviour is influenced by the environment, the operating conditions, and the decisions that people are making around that. So we actually have much more influence around that, and that has much more power. So the more that we can consider that, the better, which is why I've been quite so obsessive about us making sure that we're pulling those elements about connection to work, beliefs about that, the social norms, what the operational priming and the like is doing to make sure that we get that into the framework. And I kind of said to you earlier, Sam, but I'll say it in public as well. We've just done a big validation study on our broader culture framework, and the stats of that have stood up perfectly to that. So I'm really excited because we've done the kind of predictive analysis to see how the broader cultural model that we've used to influence and adopt the safety culture framework that we've built, when you look at the stats on it, it's showing that model of overall environmental drivers is predictive of about 62% of the variance in behaviour. So the figures work out perfectly. And if you are a psychology geek, you will know how delighted I am on that, because most models only predict anywhere between about 25 up to 35, if they're lucky, 40%.
Wow.
So we're really giddy about the power that that's had. But it shows how the research works on that in terms of, we've captured as much as we can in terms of that operating context influence. So I think how we've tweaked it and brought it, really put the safety lens on it has helped us, using that framework to, I guess, to inform and inspire us around the safety culture work that we've done. Well, it certainly made me feel really confident going into the review session that we have next week, because I know it's based on really robust data and insights. But it also feels like the right widening of stuff to try and make a difference in this context too. Yeah. So in terms of next steps, should we talk to people a little bit about the pillars that are in the framework? What do you think? Where do you want to go, Sam?
I think we can give some of that. You can give some of that away.
Okay. So do you want me to do it or do you want to do it? What's your preference?
I do fire. Yeah, you go for it. I don't. Yeah. I don't mind you. I can jump in.
The sound of my voice today. I've got excited, haven't I? Well, so as you talked about, I think we had a couple of priorities on this, didn't we, as we were building it out?
Yeah.
One was about ensuring that we didn't create this kind of one size fits all tick list, that we created a variety of factors that are anchored into what's your ideal, so that you can figure out which are the ones that are going to be most, well, you can do some analysis and data collection to be able to prioritize the ones that are going to make the biggest difference in your context, given your goals. So we've tried to make it not complex. It's got 4 core pillars, but it's got a number of sub factors in there, so you can really start to think about broadly what's the specific things that you want to go at. We've tried to make sure that we bring this sense of operating context in there, but that we've broadened the definition of what employee readiness looks like from what I've just talked about there, from have people got the training to actually what is the other stuff that's driving that. So we've kind of picked that up. And I think the other thing that we've really tried to do is make sure that we break this down into bite-sized chunks, I guess, so that it doesn't feel massively overwhelming and you're not trying to do everything at once. To break it down a bit more. So there are kind of 4 key factors 4 key pillars that we've built it into that then have sub-factors below them. And unsurprisingly, one of the first ones is around leadership tone. But within there, what we're really focusing on is the piece around leadership behaviour, but the impact that leadership behaviour and leadership tone has on others. So not just are people role modelling, but to what extent is leadership behaviour really influencing the environment that people are operating within, the expectations that they have about what good looks like, and the social norms that are guiding the safety behaviour. So really looking at the role that leadership bring in terms of how safety is valued, understood, and shows up within the organisation, and not just do they look like they are following the rules, but are they actively encouraging other people to do so? Are they making decisions that encourage them to do that? And are they running the business in a way that allows those behaviours to show up consistently, rather than talking about them and then running the business in a way that creates a need for compromise or a challenge? Anything else you'd want to add to that one, Sam? Or what's your thoughts on that factor?
I suppose so. When we were pulling these together, we were quite adamant that they lent into challenges and issues and frustrations that arguably I'd probably come across in my career more than yourself because of the safety lens. And this one sort of really leans into that sort of the actions don't match the words kind of scenario. So for me, it was being really consistent with and visible with leadership and communication and the way they do things, and calm under pressure and those kind of things, and the sort of the external factors that can make safety sort of become a relatively non-discussed subject in times of peak and operational busyness. So for this, it was very much actions and words matching but being consistent and visible from a leadership perspective. And I think what we've done and what we've created is lent into that quite nicely.
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting piece there, isn't it, about compromise. So at what point, or do leaders ever compromise on safety outcomes? What are the pressures? And how do we support and ensuring the system means that those things are never compromised, because that's the start of erosion of those behaviours through the entire system. If we show that they are negotiable or they're only important in certain conditions, then we're creating the opportunity for people to compromise whenever they want, for sure. Yeah. The next factor really focused around the things that influence truly functional and effective enabling safety systems and processes. So the goal for us is really around identifying and illuminating what might need to shift around the priorities of building the structures, the tools, and the processes that really support safe work and the social expectations around that. So at all points, we're not just thinking about, is this creating the kind of tick box of do we have in place what we need, but also is it creating the expectations, the social norms, the stories and the beliefs that people need to drive things forward. Now, I know this is absolutely your wheelhouse, Sam, so I'm not going to try and talk in this in any more detail than that. I'll let you talk about what's important around this area.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, this is, yeah, like I said, my sort of bag, and what I've done for many years in my career, building safety systems. And I think, again, one of the challenges that you often come across is you've got all singing, all dancing systems, we've got these awards, we've got these accreditations, this, that, and the other, but the behaviours aren't necessarily matched by the systems. So there are still challenges, regardless of how strong your system is. The culture or the behaviours or the climate that you're working in might not be as robust or has caught up with the systems. So for this is, having really strong systems, but more importantly, having clear ownership and accountability. So making sure they are owned by the right people and understood by everybody at every level within that organisation. Clear messages, open dialogue, strong communication, consistent communication. Again, and people understanding priorities and where they fit within that sort of communication scheme, within that within the systems and processes. And then for me, it's kind of where that system fits in the governance strategy and sort of almost overall performance system of that organization. Now, historically, safety systems have sat outside potentially, of the operating business system, but how do we fully integrate that into, take the safety system and fully integrate it into the everyday operating system, if you like, making sure that it just becomes a part of how that business operates every day. So it's, the systems are very much going to help the operating context and the other pillars that we've got, but they're also very important as a standalone. So we thought, our conversations very much came to yes, that has a pillar or an element within this framework, because whilst it provides support to the others, it does sit in there as its own, because we have to have strong systems and processes in place.
Yeah, I'm a real kind of analogy freak, and I always think great system processes are like the skeleton of any kind of functioning body, really. You can't, the other pieces can't work unless they've got that infrastructure around them. So yeah, for sure, it's massively important. And I think that point that you make, probably one of the reasons that it's felt so easy for us to work in partnership on things, even though we bring a different lens, is I really see the priorities that you bring around that piece of workability and alignment to what the business is doing day in, day out, and how critical that is for you, which is the absolute foundation, isn't it, of it becoming culturally effective. I don't think our partnership would have worked if your ethos was any different to that, really, because that's a critical part of the culture piece, working effectively.
And I think this is an opportunity in the work that we're doing is, and I guess why this collaboration works really well, because obviously you're very much the psychologist in the team, and bring the kind of skills from the behavioural perspective. But when we get to the safety system stuff, where we put the sort of pure safety lens on it, that's where our sort of expertise comes in. And I'm a massive fan that complexity will have an impact on behaviour, and from experience will drive the wrong behaviours, because if people don't understand what's expected of them, they'll just do what they think they need to do, and sadly in our industry that normally leads to a not very nice consequence.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, makes total sense. Okay, so next area to talk about then, so the third pillar for us, we aptly or grandly titled employee readiness. And the focus on this was really around, some of it is about the capability. So there's a skills piece in there, but it's as much about kind of motivation, team influence, and also having the confidence to demonstrate and shape safe behaviour. So this is really where this piece around, do I know how I need to show up? do I have the skills in terms of how I need to show up, but do I also have the confidence to be able to show up in that way, both for myself, or if I notice other people behaving in a way that is unhelpful or unsafe, do I have the confidence to call that out and help them demonstrate other behaviour? So this piece is really, I suppose, considers our people absolutely as individuals who we influence, but who are just as influential on the behaviours of those around them, and therefore our partners in truly creating a safety culture that embeds and sustains. So for us, the focus on this is how do we get people to really believe this, but want to live it for themselves, but also really speak out and encourage other people to live it when needed.
Massive. And I think this is probably one that we've talked about a couple of times, isn't it? Particularly in sort of our approach in how we work with organisations, is how do we get the people involved? How do we get the teams involved? And I think that's been quite high on our priority, hasn't it, the whole way through? Is how do we hear the voice of the people that are arguably going to have the greatest impact on what we're trying to do. So employee readiness is huge, and I think we kind of look at this in two ways, don't we? We look at it from an employee readiness from a safety operational perspective. So have they got the tools and the resource and the capability and the awareness and the training and the skills and all that kind of stuff? But also, have they got the readiness for this sort of change that we so very much in that leadership tone, where we talk about and the beginning of the conversation around, is the organisation ready for the journey that it's about to go on? Are employees ready? Because effectively, anything we do change is going to have the greatest impact on them, I would have thought.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a massive thing about effective change of meeting people where they're at. So to your very first point, I think in the conversation, if we set ourselves a cookie cutter, one size fits all goal that's about everybody trying to get to best in class, but actually our people, or, we've taken on a new site or the like, where there has just never been a conversation or a narrative on this, or people just aren't used to those standards, trying to get people to that will feel totally unreasonable or just totally unattainable. We're much better to support people to get to the first step and then build a cultural strategy that is iterative and building things over time. Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right. There's a piece here about how do we help people imagine something that feels like a manageable, sustainable change and get to that and then move through to something else. And some of that's the challenge of helping them see what good could look like next. And some of it's about picking a good that feels like it's actually possible from the starting point.
Yeah,
I probably learned more about that as a run leader than I did as a psychologist, if I'm completely honest. Never suggesting somebody does a marathon when they're just doing their first couch to 5K. You've got to start in small steps, don't you, and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Sure. Okay. And then, last but not least, operating context then. And as you can see, as we're talking about these factors, they kind of influence and nudge each other. That's the really interesting thing about culture, is it's this kind of self-reinforcing, resetting system. But if you don't codify it and organize it in some way, then you'll just feel like it's a swirl that's happening to you. So how we've organized operating context is really thinking about this piece around codifying and understanding what the wider environment looks like. So whether that's really stepping into the work design, understanding what the social climate is within things, but understanding some of those nudges and systems around people that might be influencing their everyday behavior. So it could be just little things like how the work environment is set up. Is it easy to access safety equipment if you need to do that? So it could be real practical things about operating context, but some of it might be stuff like, do our production targets actually enable people to be able to act in the way that we need them to? Can they hit that number by also demonstrating the safety behavior that we need them to? Do those two meet, or are they in tension with each other? So there's a lot in there about that wider soup, I guess, that people are operating in, and how that flavors how they show up and what they're doing.
Yeah, massive.
So
and that's why we I guess we kind of talked about it in a bit of length earlier, wasn't it? The operating context, because it's for me, it's something that's very often forgotten It's all very well spouting all these safety rules and regulations and what people must do, but if they're working in an environment that's not conducive to them being able to operate safely, then it doesn't really matter. There's no point having them to a certain degree, because they'll just do what they need to do to get the job done. So this was, this was a big one for me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So in terms of next steps, then we've built out a framework, and you can probably tell just from the conversation that we're having between each other today that we've really kind of stretched and tested, I would say, each other's kind of professional experience and expertise on this. Everything from Sam giving us his rage list of his many years of experience on this in terms of the challenges that he's seen for himself over and over again that he wanted to influence, to me bringing my own kind of experience around some of the real challenges of trying to shift behaviour in a sustained way through my work and culture change. We've brought this together to build something that we believe works because it's based on our experience, but it's also based on the evidence-based models from the Employee Experience Project. But we're not megalomaniacs, are we? Well, maybe I am, Sam, but you aren't. You're keeping us grounded. I'm not. We're not.
I wouldn't say either of us are, to be honest.
Thank you for that. There was a delay again on the internet there again, I noticed. But what we're doing is we're not believing our own kind of conversations on this, because we recognise that when you can look at something for long enough, you can convince yourself of whatever you wish. So next week we're taking this to a panel of leaders in the industry and asking them their view. We're going to ask them to play with it, pick it apart, and give us their versions of the stuff that they would want to influence around this as well. So we're going in with our big girl boys in pants on, aren't we, to hear whatever feedback we need to on this to take it forward. So next instalment of this conversation will be us on the other side of that, and we'll share with you some of what we've learned and how that's helping us think about how we evolve things forward. But our goal is really to make this the best thing it can be. So we're up for the constructive feedback, aren't we, in order to move it forward?
I think so. We are at the moment. That may change at about 3:00 next week.
Yeah. We'll not do the LinkedIn live 10 minutes afterwards, shall we? We'll let ourselves reset before we.
I think we said we're going to do it the day after, didn't we? So it'll be the 22nd. Yeah.
Something like that, for sure. So we'd love you to join along. We'll put the next live up on the series. So join us if you wish, and we'll let you know how things have gone.
Thanks all.
Thanks all.